All-Stars, I'm Coach Delaney and welcome to our official virtual learning studio. We at Excite All-Stars are so happy to have you guys here. We can't wait to dive into this season of virtual learning, from anything with art, academics, athletics, you name it, we've got it for you. I'm Delaney, I'm Coach Delaney, and I will be teaching you guys photography for the season. So if there's anything that you guys want to see, any questions that you have for future lessons, please feel free to comment below or just contact us. We'll be happy to accommodate you in any way. We hope that everyone out there is safe and well during the COVID-19. We're going to be providing a lot of activities and really fun things for you guys to do at home. And my personal favorite, some photography things for you to do at home. Today we're going to be learning about 3 key essential settings on a DSLR. If you guys have a DSLR, a camera at home that you can use, feel free to follow along with this lesson. It's not hard at all. We're going to have a lot of fun. There's a really cool activity, some examples to show you, so I can't wait to dive into this lesson. Today we're going to be using a Canon 70D. So if you guys have any DSLR from Nikon, Sony, Canon, it doesn't matter. We're just going to be learning some of the basics of photography, but this is the one that we're going to use. So we're also going to be using a 50mm lens. That is not required, but if you guys have a certain type of lens that's close to this one, or just a prime lens that you actually can use, that'll be best for this lesson. But if not, like I said, totally fine. We're gonna dive right into it. Okay, so first I want to start off by showing you guys the camera, all the mechanics of it. Yours might not be exactly the same, but that's okay. Like I said, no worries. We're gonna turn it off. I'm gonna show you guys these. Now we're not gonna learn all of these today. As you can see, they have different letters and say different things, different icons, but we want to make sure that our camera, no matter what camera we have, is always on M. So most cameras will have a button here, or maybe it's use something that you can just turn on your own, but let's just always make sure it's on M. So ours is on M. We always want to keep it on M because M stands for manual, which means that you will be able to manipulate the settings with M. We won't be using this or the flash or anything, so don't worry about that. Like I said, if you have a prime lens, one lens that's one focus area, that'll be great. I'm going to take this off so you guys can see. Here I have a Canon 50mm lens, and this is the one that we're going to be using today. This number that's right here on the camera just stands for the range that it will be able to shoot in, and we're just going to pop this right back on. Alright, so now that our settings are on manual, we have our lens in. Let's turn that camera on. Also, we need to always make sure that we have an SD card. So an SD card is what is going to hold the memory of the photos that we're taking. The SD card is usually located somewhere on the side of your camera. On some other cameras, it's located at the bottom, or it might be in the same place where the battery is. But on this one in particular, you're going to pop this slot open that's on the side of the camera, and there should be a SD card right up in here. And then as far as battery, you guys might have cameras that take regular batteries or camera batteries, or in this area the SD card and the battery might live together. You're just going to pop this. You can see there's a battery in there. Good. Put that back in. Alright, now we're all ready to go. So now we can actually turn it on. And there's no card in mine right now, but that's okay. I'm going to flip my screen so you guys can see. And see, it's showing what's going on right now. And we're going to learn today about these 3 settings here. Hope everybody can see. Let me cover it for a second so you guys can really see. So right here is going to be what's called our ISO. It's on auto right now, so let's put it to a certain number so you guys can see. Here is what's going to be called our ISO. Here is our aperture, and here is our shutter speed. We're going to learn about all 3 of these in just a second, but for now, please look at these examples of what an ISO, aperture, and a shutter speed is, how they work together in one perfect harmony, and how they're a family as far as the settings on your camera. As you guys can see here in this chart, it shows a triangle of how ISO, shutter speed, and aperture, which I just showed you on the camera, all work together. So ISO is how sensitive the image is to light. ISO is in general just sensitivity to light. So whenever you're changing the numbers on your camera, just keep that in mind, that that's what you're changing. As far as aperture, it is about how wide the shutter opens, and when we say shutter, that means inside of the lens. So earlier when I took off the lens for you guys, you might have seen a small square or a mirror in there. The mirror is what reflects the images that we take from the lens onto the SD card, but in film, naturally, that used to be a mirror used to reflect images onto paper, but now we're doing digital. So that's a fun fact for you guys. But aperture has a lot to do with how much light you're basically letting the lens bring into the camera, and it controls how much light comes in. And also shutter speed is how long the shutter stays open. So when you're shooting something, when you hear that click sound, that is the shutter. When you actually press the button that's on the outside of the camera, that is the shutter. And when you hear the sound, that's the shutter actually moving to capture the picture. So the shutter speed is how fast we're actually capturing that light, capturing the picture to create an image. So you guys just keep in mind those three words: ISO, aperture, and shutter speed. Those are the three settings that we're going to be going over today before we hop into the activity. And this image here is how we can best represent ISO. If you would like to think about it in the form of how to brighten your picture before you shoot, or just how to create more light inside of your picture in general, think about ISO as this. As you can see here in this picture, the higher that we increase our ISO, the brighter that the picture gets, the clearer that the rainbow gets. Please remember that the ISO, the aperture, and the shutter speed work together as a family. If they aren't all on the right settings that match each other, or you're not on the right stop, or it doesn't have the right aperture, the ISO is way too high, it could create a lot of noise, it could create blur, it could create some really cool settings on purpose that are really stylistic that I'm going to get into in just a second. But just for now, remember to think of ISO in this way. Whenever you need to actually brighten your photo and actually see it, just remember to increase your ISO. But in some cases, we are going to need to have a lower ISO if our aperture is higher, but we will get into that next with aperture. As you guys can see here, our ISO is low at 100. Unlike the last picture, when it was at a higher ISO, it was the better picture. But this picture has a higher ISO of 3200, and it's a completely noisy image. That's because our aperture and our f-stop is not working as a family with our ISO. It is very important that all of our settings work together, and that we always make sure that we are on the right f-stop and that we are on the right amount of shutter speed. We do not want anything to be too slow or too fast, or an aperture to be too high or too low, or too open or too closed per se. So then that way we will not get a noisy image like the one on the right here. See, the ISO is low on the left side, but it's a clearer image. So low and high for ISO does not always mean good or bad. It just depends on how well your ISO, your aperture, and your shutter speed are working together as a family. As I mentioned before, with aperture, it's not always about if something is too light or too dark. Just like ISO is not always about too light or too dark, it can potentially be noisy. Aperture or f-stop can also have a lot of different variations that come with it. So here, as you can see in this image, let's start with the blue circles. The blue circles are a representation of your lenses. So you can be at f1.4, you can be at f2, f2.8, f4, goes all the way up to f32 on this chart. So as you can see, f32 is the largest number, but it has the smallest opening. And f1.4 is the smallest number, but it has the largest opening. This basically means that at f.4, our lens is open to its maximum capacity, which means that we are letting in the most light that we possibly can through our lens. Our lens cannot let in any more light than f.4. But when we are at f32, our lens is closed enough so that we're letting in the least amount of light. This can be used for different reasons, like lighting, of course, but it also can be used to control our depth of field. So as you can see in the images below, there is a figure of a person in a house, but as we get closer to f.4, the house gets blurred, which means that there is more depth of field by f.14 than there is f32. So you guys just keep in mind that the higher our f-stop is, which would be the highest on this chart, f32, the less light we're able to bring in, and the lower our f-stop is, which would be f1.4, the more light that we're actually going to be able to bring in. So a really cool fun fact for you guys that you can also try at home. Some of your iPhones and smartphones now have what is called the portrait mode, which is relating to our second row on this chart with the house and the blurred house figure as we increase or decrease our aperture. The portrait mode is actually playing with the aperture to actually give a depth of field so that your pictures are more in focus on you and you have more of a blurred background like we see here on the end of f1.4. All right, and finally, last but not least, we're gonna get into the shutter speed, which is a really cool introduction into the assignment and activity that we're gonna be doing today with you guys. So as you can see here, let's focus on the man that's running. If we are at the number 1 on the line, we can see that his image is blurred all the way up until we get to about 1/60th or 1/25th of a stop. So we're gonna call shutter speeds stops in this case scenario, like it says at the bottom of the chart, full stops. So 1/2 of a stop, 1/4 of a stop, 1/8 of a stop, 1/15th of a stop. All of this means that in this case, the more that we go to the right of the line, the faster our camera is actually taking the picture. And the closer we get to the left of the line, the slower it's getting. This can be used in stylistic ways, or it could be a serious error when shooting if it's not correctly aligned with your ISO and your aperture. Like I said in the beginning, they all have to work as a family. So we always have to make sure that the amount of light that we're letting in and the amount of light that we're catching at a certain speed all cohesively work together to capture our photo and give us what we want. So if we were to jump up in the sky, jump up on a trampoline, pour a glass of water out, pop some confetti out of a confetti blaster, we would need to have a higher shutter speed in order to catch all of that, because if it's at a lower shutter speed, like 1/15, like the chart that we just saw, we would be catching a blurred image of motion. But like I said, sometimes a blurred image or an image where something is completely shot in its stillness, like stop motion photography, can be used as a stylistic advantage, which brings me to our really fun, really cool exercise today. You guys can use your parents, your siblings, yourselves. I personally today am going to be using a fidget spinner to show you guys some of the really cool ways that you can do blurred motion photography and catch a lot of things, and you never know what you could use it for. You could shoot someone riding around in your neighborhood on a bike. You could shoot someone throwing something up in the air. Like I said, it could be used on water objects. It could be used on food. It could be used on household objects like a ball around the house. It could be used if someone's jumping in the air, jumping on a bed. So let's dive right into it. I'm going to show you guys what exactly you have to change and do on your settings to get that beautiful stop motion, blurred motion photo. Okay guys, so on your cameras, you are going to find your settings. Here we have our shutter speed. As you can see here, we are able to go back and forth. These are the same numbers that you guys saw on the chart before. So think about shutter speed as this. The higher number that we have, the faster we are going. You can even think about it as miles if it helps. So if we're going 125 miles per hour, that's pretty fast compared to a shutter speed that is on a stop of 4 or 8 or even 1. So when you're doing your shutter speed, just always remember this is actually how fast the camera is actually catching the photo. So if we go back here, we're going to go back to our aperture, which if you guys remember, these are low numbers, but we're letting in a lot of light. So as you can see here on the screen, f2 is pretty bright, right guys? Oh, went back to shutter speed. F2 is pretty bright, but as we move down the line and get to a lower, well, a higher number, we let in less light. See the comparison from F2 to F22? The more we go to the right, the darker it gets. The more we go to the left, the lighter it gets. And last but certainly not least, my personal favorite, ISO. The lower we go in numbers, like 100, the darker this screen gets. The higher we go, the brighter it gets. So just keep that all in mind when you guys are messing around with your settings. Okay guys, so now that we know all that we know about shutter speeds, ISOs, apertures, the works, we're gonna get our item that moves, or a parent, family member, sibling, and we're going to take our camera and we're going to play and manipulate with our shutter speed, ISO, and our aperture to come out with a motion blurred picture and a clear picture like these examples here. One of these photos that you guys see is a child who is jumping. It's pretty clear. We can see him jumping off of something. But another one is a blurred shot of him that is blurry on purpose due to the shutter speed. So what I want you guys to do is to find your camera, find a subject to shoot, or find something with motion. It can be water, it can be a ball bouncing in the air, anything, and figure out what shutter speed, aperture / f-stop, and ISO you have to create these types of images. Here is an image of one of the attempts that I made with the motion stop photos using the fidget spinner. The shutter speed was 1/115th of a stop. My ISO was set at 400 and my aperture was set at 4, an aperture of f4. In another picture, I changed my shutter speed to be 1/125th of a stop, and as you can see here in this photo, the motion has been blurred, but it's much slower to where we can make out that it's actually a fidget spinner here. My shutter speed was at 1/125th of a stop, which means I actually increased it, and my ISO also increased so that we can see it, and my aperture as well with a stop of f5.6. And finally, in order to get a clear image, I pushed my shutter speed to the limit for this shot, and in 1/1000th of a stop, I had an aperture of 2.8 and an ISO of 1200. So that was pretty high. So here we can clearly see it, and compared to the other two, if you guys want to rewind, you can see that increasing my shutter speed the entire time basically helped my camera shoot the subject more quickly so that we can actually stop it and see what it actually was. But the blurred image is also pretty cool, and it can be used in anything. So like I said, grab a sibling, grab an object, something that you can throw in the air, and try it for yourself. In this shot, the actual fidget spinner was still moving very fast actually, and here's a video of where it was really moving at while I was spinning it and shooting it at the same time. Thank you guys so much for tuning in today. That was our lesson for today. I hope you guys learned a lot about all of these camera settings. There's so much more to learn. If there's anything that you guys ever want to learn, like I said, please comment below. Give me topics, ask questions. I'm always here for you guys. And be sure to send me you guys' photos after you take them. Like I said, it would be cool to use them in a pool with your family, with a dog running and catching something. I mean, the possibilities are endless. You guys could even use a sparkler and actually do some light painting. So if you guys want more activities, slowing down or speeding up your shutter speed to create really cool stop motion pictures, or slow-mo pictures, or just blurred motion pictures, just Google light painting and other really cool ways that you can use shutter speed to create these really cool images. And thank you, and I hope to see you guys next week.